Protesters in Israel are staging a day of disruption, blocking roads and mounting demonstrations as they call on the government to secure the return of hostages being held in Gaza. And this comes ahead of today's Security Cabinet meeting and follows yesterday's airstrike on a hospital in Khan Younis. Officials in Gaza say the attack killed 20 people, including 5 journalists. Israel says it was targeting a Hamas surveillance camera in the area.
Traffic has been brought to a complete standstill on this highway north of Tel Aviv. Thick black plumes rise from burning tires near Kibbutz Yakum. These protesters are demanding action. It's all part of a nationwide day of disruption. They want this war to end. Pressure is mounting on Prime Minister Netanyahu to make a deal with Hamas and to bring the hostages home.
We could have ended the war a year ago and brought all the hostages and soldiers home. We could have saved hostages and soldiers, but the Prime Minister chose again and again to sacrifice civilians for the sake of his rule.
Even after Hamas hinted at compromise, Israel has yet to budge. This footage shows Gaza's night sky erupting in fire, with Israel pressing on with its assault. One of these strikes hit Nasser Hospital, the largest medical facility in the Khan Younis area, killing at least 20 civilians, among them several journalists and rescue workers. These are the last rites of one of the journalists killed, 33-year-old Mariam Dagga. She is survived by her son. Her family says she knowingly risked her life to tell Gaza's story.
She said, "When I die and when I'm martyred." I responded, "Why will you leave us?" She then said, "There is nothing left. It's done. Today or tomorrow, I will be martyred."
In a tweet, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the strike a tragic mishap. In this war, civilians are paying the price. Khan Younis lies in ruins. Whole neighborhoods reduced to rubble and dust. Families here are surviving on scraps of bread. And with each passing day, no one knows when or where the next strike will fall.
Let's join our correspondent Tania Krämer in Tel Aviv. Welcome, Tania. What sort of turnout has there been for this day of protest?
Well, I think it was another large turnout. We had a week ago day of strikes and also protests. Today it was, called for by the families, the forum that represents them, and most of the hostage families, not all of them. And they wanted to see a day of struggle. We saw that in the report, different actions today that culminated tonight here in that march, and then here at this gathering at the so-called hostage square in central Tel Aviv. Now, this has ended now. Most people are now moving on, but what was really clear to see was a very emotional evening once again, calling on the government to go for a deal to end the war, to bring those remaining 50 hostages home. And, one of the slogans was not left, not right, now political left or right, the hostages above all. And that, of course, happened while the Security Cabinet came together in the afternoon, and there were reports that the deal that was being talked about by the mediators that Hamas reported has agreed to was not even on the table. So this is extremely frustrating for people here. Many of the families of the hostages there are extremely worried about their loved ones, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants to expand the operations and the war in Gaza.
And are these protests likely to have any effect on the Prime Minister's decision-making?
Well, Well, I asked many people here this because most of them are going, to protest every Saturday, and to these protests, and it didn't really have an impact so much on the government. But people here told me, what alternative do we have? We just have to continue doing this. We just have to be heard somehow. And many here actually voiced, their hope that possibly US President Donald Trump will actually intervene. And he had said, recently that he thinks in 2 to 3 weeks the war will be ending and there will be a solution to this, although nobody knows, if this will actually be the case. But there were calls tonight on President Trump to intervene and to push the Israeli government to go for a deal.
Israel is facing international criticism over that attack on the hospital in Khan Younis. How's that being reported there?
Well, I don't think it has the same impact that it had internationally. And tonight here, at least in this area, people are mostly concerned about the fate of the hostages, although there are some people also talking about the suffering of Palestinians. I think what was unusual, the only thing is that Prime Minister Netanyahu released a statement in English saying this was a mishap. Of course, also the army announced that they will investigate. They already released some findings, but Israeli human rights groups and other human rights groups have said for many years it is very and highly problematic to have the Israeli military investigating itself, and I also think Palestinians don't expect any accountability coming out of this.
All right, thanks, Tania. Tania Krämer in Tel Aviv.
And I'm now joined by Ariel Bernstein. He's a former soldier for the Israeli Defense Forces, and he was also politically active against Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, with the NGO Breaking the Silence. Now he researches military conduct. Ariel, welcome to DW. Can I ask you, Netanyahu called the strike a tragic mishap. As a former IDF soldier, what's your take?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very cynical tweet. I think it's kind of ridiculous to call a direct strike on a hospital in a double tap kind of technique in which you bomb once, wait for the rescue team to arrive and bomb again, mistake. And I think he can possibly say that because he knows that he will be held to no consequences by anyone, so he can just say it's a mistake and move on.
Now, you just mentioned it, that there are claims that this attack could have been a so-called double tap strike. So the first strike and a couple of minutes later when rescuers have arrived, a second strike to deliberately target rescue workers. Do you think that's likely?
I think it's a fact. It's what the evidence shows in the videos and from testimonies on the ground. And it's not the first time that the IDF has done this. It's been completely normalized since the 7th of October. It's in the words of sources from within the army that spoke with journalist Yuval Avraham, they say that it's a way of verifying that the target is eliminated completely. So it's not the first time that the IDF would be doing that.
Now, that strike also killed 5 journalists, and a further 240 journalists have been killed since the start of the war. Do you also see a pattern there?
Most definitely. Only since the beginning of August, already 16 journalists have died in Gaza. And it's another thing that's been normalized, like the bombing of hospitals and like the attacking of rescue teams. And personally, my father is a cameraman for the Associated Press, and it's just so shocking and devastating to imagine that he could be assassinated or murdered just because he's doing his job. And it's kind of hard not to think that these journalists are targeted directly, especially in the Nasser hospital on the 4th floor. It's been known to be a spot from which international media does live streams, like Reuters were doing yesterday when they were struck by the IDF.
Now let's look at Israel. Many businesses and municipalities joined hostage families in a strike earlier this week to put pressure on the government to agree to a hostage deal. Is that, in your view, an encouraging sign?
It's hard to be encouraged. I don't want to be completely pessimistic, but I think that this government has no boundaries and will stop at nothing. And it doesn't see gain in ending the war, because as the war continues, they can continue to solidify their power and to control basically through a state of emergency. And they know that they won't be held accountable. And they fear, I assume, of the consequences once the war ends. They also need to deal with the day after and all kinds of complicated political questions that they want to avoid. So if I thought that this government has a sense of loyalty to its people or a sense of responsibility, I could be encouraged, but I fear that the answer is no. And I just want to say, if I'm already speaking here on German television, that I think that one of the reasons is that they don't need to fear consequences is because countries like the United States and Germany basically give a complete green light for the government to do what they want without any consequences, and they don't need to worry about being pushed out of the global economy or the global scene.
Now, I want to have a quick look at the power dynamics. IDF officials have openly criticized Netanyahu's plan to invade Gaza City. With that open dissent, is there a chance that Netanyahu might back down?
I think the only way that Netanyahu would back down is if they are forced to by international pressure. And I don't think that he has a sense of accountability or responsibility towards the Israeli citizens. So I think the question of whether or not they're going to stop this horrendous military campaign that's just killing tens or even more than tens of thousands of people in Gaza really depends on countries like Germany and other countries in the EU and then in the United States, of course, and the way
Bernstein.
they act. So in that way, I think that Germany aren't just looking from the side at the situation, but you are active participants and you have responsibility to help us end this. Thank you for having me.
Ariel Bernstein there, a former IDF soldier and researcher of military conduct. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us.
Well, Goher Rahbour is a consultant general and colorectal surgeon. He was at the NASA hospital in June this year and joins us now from Cambridge in the UK. Welcome to DW. We saw in our report a little while ago the IDF claimed it was targeting a Hamas surveillance camera on the hospital. While you were there, did you see any evidence of Hamas activity there?
No, it's we spoke last time, Phil, when I was there at NASA. It's been a couple of months since my return. But whilst I was there was absolutely no Hamas that you come across. There's no person in military fatigues. There's no people who are armed with guns or knives who enter the hospital or you see at all in my whole 1 month, which was there. The targeting of that site, which took place, is in between theatre cases we would be operating on. We would go to that particular site for just a bit of breath of fresh air. And it's quite an atrocious thing to see. For me, this is a completely deliberate act. I've been in touch with colleagues yesterday morning when these events were taking place. And it's very clear cut. It's a deliberate. You don't have two strikes at the same site on a hospital accidentally or a mishap, as it's been called.
Where were you? When you got news of this attack on this hospital where you had worked, what went through your mind?
Horrific. So we are still in touch with colleagues on a daily basis. Obviously, the conditions have deteriorated over the last 6 to 8 weeks significantly. The information, we're in constant contact through WhatsApp and other messaging streams, and we get that up-to-date information. So those videos come out before probably are out into the public domain, and right from very senior staff who were present there with videos which were being recorded when the second strike comes in as well. And then obviously you're extremely concerned what's happened. Those colleagues, are they alive? Have they passed away, sadly? Those type of things.
And the thinking behind this so-called double tap appears to be you cause destruction, first responders go in, doctors go in, rescue workers go in, and then you hit them with the second tap, as it were. That must give you, as a doctor, pause for thought.
Yeah, I think we've obviously seen this elsewhere as well, but I'm not surprised with this deliberate attack at all. Throughout these last nearly 22 months, it's been a collective punishment on everyone in Gaza. There's been bombings of literally every single hospital there, churches, mosques, schools, any other important structure. So we've all seen now the destruction that's taken place. And for me, in my opinion, and we can call it out. This is a genocide which is taking place. This is an ethnic cleansing. And even in these last 6 to 8 weeks, since coming back, you have had organizations who now call it out. The MSF, MAP, Amnesty International, the genocide scholars, Bit Salem. So there's much more of a consensus, and people are opening their eyes and having the courage to speak out now.
And so
overall, yeah.
And so when the Israeli government, when IDF spokespeople say Israel is defending itself against Hamas militants who are deliberately hiding themselves amongst civilians, what do you say?
So for me, it's complete nonsense. What's been said, it's a mishap. So we can call 60,000 civilians killed a mishap. 20,000 children,
well, to be fair,
healthcare workers.
To be fair, yeah. The mishap was yesterday's strike on the hospital. The mishap, as I understand it, did not extend to the whole Gaza war.
I would call it the whole thing. You don't kill 20,000 children, and this for me is, this is a deliberate targeting of an entire population.
And now Israel says it plans to expand its ground operations. How will medical facilities in Gaza cope with the enormous increase in the numbers of casualties that this will bring?
So this is extremely worrying. I've had, so there are, from where the situation is now, obviously Nasser is within this red zone, and it's, like yesterday, it has been bombed. It is extremely worrying what we're thinking is coming next to Gaza City. The whole population is being pushed into a very small location. There is hardly anywhere now for the people to go. There is overcrowding. We've already seen the issues around malnutrition, the famine, which the UN have called it out last week. And so conditions are deteriorating rapidly. So the people who now are in Gaza City, where are they going? The whole situation is extremely worrying.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us again, Goher Rahbour, colorectal surgeon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Well, at a press conference today, our chief political editor, Michaela Kufner, questioned the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, about German policy towards Israel.
Chancellor Merz, journalist organizations accuse Israel of deliberately targeting journalists in the Gaza Strip. Do you also see a systematic pattern here?
At the moment, I do not believe that this was a targeted attack on journalists. But this is, of course, a result of what the Israeli army started a few days ago and of what the Israeli government decided to do. In this respect, I feel that my decision that under these conditions, Israel should not receive weapons that will be used in the Gaza Strip has now been more than proven correct. What the Israeli government is doing there and what the Israeli army is doing in carrying out the Israeli government's wishes is unacceptable. And yesterday's events cast a dark shadow over what is otherwise, in every sense, a justified course of action against Hamas.
Right, let's get more on this from our political correspondent, Simon Young. Welcome, Simon. So we just heard the German Chancellor describe the Israeli military's latest attacks in Gaza as an unacceptable occurrence in what he said was otherwise a justifiable course of action against Hamas. What do you make of this?
Well, Phil, I think what Friedrich Merz thinks in particular is not acceptable is the latest expansion of the Israeli army's operations in Gaza and the high number of deaths that are the result. And he said this repeatedly, and this is also why, as he mentioned there, he's taken this position that Germany won't supply weapons to Israel that can be used in Gaza. I think there is some concern here in Berlin that there could be legal fallout if at some point in the future there are further legal proceedings against Israel and potentially against its backers as well. But having said all that, nothing has changed in the fundamental solidarity between Germany and Israel, and that means Germany's support for Israel's right to defend itself, in particular following the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. That's the bedrock of the relationship between these two countries. I think Friedrich Merz wanted to, make both these points today, and he's sort of ended up mixing his messaging a little bit there.
The Chancellor also confirmed that Germany will not join countries like Canada and France in recognising a Palestinian state because, he says, Germany does not consider the conditions for state recognition to be fulfilled in any way at present. Decipher that for us.
Yeah, well, I think the German government focuses on the fact that the concept of Palestine, is not ultimately defined in a way that would be the basis for statehood. There's no clear definition of a sovereign Palestinian people. There's no internationally widely fully recognised Palestinian territory. There's no government that most Palestinians accept. So that's why Germany says, well, if there were a motion at the United Nations, for instance, supporting Palestinian statehood, Germany wouldn't back that at this stage. At the same time, Merz says, Israel must not prevent the conditions being created for ultimately a Palestinian state to come into being. And of course, he acknowledged also that that is what Israel is essentially doing with its expansion of the settlements in the West Bank. So, I think what the point is that right now, while the war is going on full scale in Gaza, Germany doesn't feel it's the right time to push for that ultimate settlement between Israel and the Palestinians.
Okay, thanks for that, Simon. DW political correspondent Simon Young.